Aristotle said, to avoid criticism, say nothing, do nothing, and be nothing. If you're scared of being perceived, it's likely that you've been traumatized, and the person who traumatized you wants exactly that, for you to say nothing, do nothing, and be nothing. This propels us into dissociation, a state where trauma silences us, leaving us passive observers in our own lives. I'm an artist who loves making art, but putting it out there on social media, yuck. Listen, I wanted to be the cool, mysterious artist, and so this was petrifying, but at the same time, I didn't understand where these yuck feelings were coming from and why I had this intense fear of being seen, when I've done nothing wrong. It doesn't make sense to cringe at myself.
I could cry right now. I'm so embarrassed and mad.
It's not like I did anything bad, and I'm just trying to market myself like everybody else. And then it clicked that this fear of being seen was a control tactic to protect abusive people so that they never get exposed and we never make our art.
Lately, I've been feeling like I might want to get back into it.
This is State of the Artist. I'm Liv, a Ugandan English neurodivergent artist from London. I advocate for artists by diving into the raw psychological process of breaking through creative blocks and sharing my process with you. It's not just storytelling, it's rebellion. I'm reclaiming my identity and proving to you that you can create art from the chaos they said would destroy you. So let's jump in. The person who messed up your perception sure as hell had the audacity, and yet you're the one gatekeeping yourself and hiding your art. It doesn't make sense, does it, really? My daily life looked a lot like this. I found myself rushing around for no reason. I had this tendency to do things very, very quickly. Even walking somewhere when I had plenty of time, I found myself pacing down the street like Richard Ashcroft in Bittersweet Symphony. There is this urgency to your life where you feel like you can't relax properly, ever. We tend also to not make a mess for this reason. We like the idea of making art, but the mess. We end up being so exhausted after work that
I'm just so tired, Billy. I never thought I'd be so tired at 22.
that we can barely feed ourselves, because we'll also have to clean that up too. And it's almost as if we don't trust ourselves to be adults, so we infantilize ourselves. When we do relax, it's never a peaceful experience. This guilt lingers in the background, and a dull pain rears its ugly head and comes out of nowhere like a cramp in your leg. We silence it with literally anything to make it stop, anything to block out the voices in our heads that go on and on and on, worrying. I found myself imagining the worst case scenario, cringing at social interactions for no reason at all, spiraling into this odd paranoia, like asking my friends if they're upset with me over something completely insignificant because I used the wrong emoji or something stupid like that. You kind of feel like everyone hates you, and that deep down, even though you know that's irrational, you kind of somewhere in the back of your mind think it. You also might be so scared when something good happens to you because you're sort of waiting for it all to go wrong or for you to be punished, living in this constant fear that something good will be taken away, so our art never gets to be completed or made, especially if you didn't go to art school or achieve well in school or had anyone help or nurture your creativity. We tell ourselves we could never be good at art because it's too late. It's narcissistic to even dare try. This unreasonable shame and hypervigilance is horrible to experience. Now for me, this comes from CPTSD, which started in childhood, where if you grew up in an unpredictable household where doors were constantly being slammed and you were woken up unexpectedly from arguments or moved house 25 times like I did, it sets your nervous system up to be on constant high alert. We wake up feeling like something is missing. We've forgotten something, or perhaps we're always forgetting things, and so we rush to be as productive as possible. But good art takes time, so that's just not going to work. Deep down, our body remembers being told off.
Come on now, stop it now. Stop the crying. Crying stops now, you don't cry. Real men don't cry.
Or shamed for natural creative behaviour. You sort of feel like a bad person, though you know you're not. You're probably thinking, well, this is just the way that I am. Yeah, no, actually it's not. It's a response to shame. And this is my personal experience. So if it doesn't resonate, we listen and we don't judge. It's not profound to understand that we don't feel safe in our bodies when our boundaries have been annihilated. Trauma is the annihilation of the self. So there's this interesting spiritual parallel in Sufism called fana, meaning to die before one dies, a concept made famous by mystic Rumi. Essentially a spiritual death. Whilst I don't think that traumatized people experience an ego death as such, when we've been traumatized, we can linger in a state of detachment and dissociation. It kind of feels like a living death. It's almost as if we're not fully alive. Our bodies are here, but our minds and spirits are in a haze, disconnected somewhere else. Does this sound familiar? Depersonalization is the sense of feeling detached from your body or mind, like you're an observer of yourself, whilst derealization is the feeling that the world around you isn't quite real. It has this haze to it. Being detached from our physical and emotional selves, it makes it hard to connect with our own creativity and intuition. Now, of course, dissociation is a trauma response and the mind's way of protecting itself, which it does very well. This is something I explore heavily in my own art about being an undiagnosed manic pixie nightmare. It's funny how we cope, right? Like laughing things off with sarcasm, but isn't that another trauma response? Anyway, when we use art as a way to express what we're feeling, to process emotions or reflect on experience, it can be incredibly therapeutic. The opposite of repression is expression, and so art allows us to channel these difficult emotions into something beneficial, helping us make sense and externalize what's going on inside. It's a healthy form of releasing shame, and especially if it's done mindfully, when we're truly engaged with the process and using it in a way to understand or release what's inside. So how does trauma affect creativity, and how do we reconnect and get back into artist mode? As artists, we are sensory conduits that are incredibly sensitive to the minute stimuli that we see, touch, taste, and smell and hear. Our intuition or gut instinct is linked to our senses and body's physical cues. So when we silence it, we also silence our ability to see art, or should I say feel it. Were you silent or were you silenced? When we become used to suppressing our body's physical cues, it rewires our gut instinct. We get so used to ignoring ourselves, ignoring hunger, sleep, even our basic needs like bathroom breaks or, that natural thing that we want to do. We lose rhythm. Art is probably going to be your lowest priority because it's bloody inconvenient to make. However, to be an artist is to see the world in ways most ignore, the forgotten, the discarded, the overlooked. It is love to notice. And so we must notice what we love in order to feel again and release that shame. Take something so completely ordinary, like a puddle in the rain. The light bouncing off the water refracted in a particular way makes it look spotlit, as if some higher power wants us to witness its beauty. In film, slow motion, like it's just for you, and to anybody else watching this same puddle, they might think dirty, ugly. They probably won't even notice it. They'll step over it actually, but you must stop to watch it. It's so incredible to observe that tears start falling out of your face because it's not just a puddle in the rain. It's this higher power wanting you to notice it. And it always happens when you're going through a really difficult, tough time. It's light clawing its way out of the dark, fighting to exist in a world that would rather crush it, suffocate it, swallow it whole. And in that defiance, there is this magnificence. The light refuses to be extinguished, even when dark has it surrounded. Taking a further inspection to capture what others step over, and finding order in disorder, the mundane things, the most things that people turn away from, and to be seen, truly seen, is to be loved. It's like when you have a friend who buys you a gift that you mentioned months ago and they surprise you with it. It's the rawest form of connection to notice. So no wonder we don't want to be seen, because that would mean we are deserving of love and attention, wouldn't it? In 1961, Swedish-American sculptor Claes Oldenburg wrote "I am for," an ode to what he appreciated as an artist. I am for an art that grows up not knowing it is art at all. Regrettably, I can't read the whole full ode out because of certain words, but I highly recommend it. These photos are how I interpret the meaning. When we align art with context, we give it a story. There is something so devastating about seeing a rejected object out of its place or stripped back to its bones. Seeing everyday abandoned items feels like we are watching the spirit of the person that was once there, as if their essence is still there, like a ghost, like a trace of where that dissociated spirit once was. What is not seen exists nonetheless, and there is so much emotion created by the negative space. I guess all art is haunting in that way. To me, one of the greatest cultural film impacts of Get Out was the concept of the sunken place.
Sink into the floor.
Wait.
Sink.
It perfectly illustrates metaphorically what it feels like to have no voice or control over your reality as a black person. That's exactly what dissociation feels like, screaming in a nightmare where you can't move and you can't wake up. As artists, we often try to teach our audience something when our job is to make them feel something. It's far more powerful to allow them to feel than to force them to understand. Kafka in Metamorphosis wrote, "I cannot make you understand. I cannot make anyone understand what is happening inside me. I can't even explain it myself." I read My Year of Rest and Relaxation in lockdown. It perfectly executes show don't tell. The traumatized protagonist's brilliant plan to rest and take a break from everything is just the perfect solution to all her problems. Disconnected from her emotions? Check. Completely shut out the world around her? Check. Forget the consequences of numbing yourself entirely, because who wouldn't want to go down a path of deeper alienation and numbness? Check. Because clearly avoiding everything forever is totally without consequence and completely fine. Many find this book frustrating and they hate the protagonist. They find the plot really self-indulgent because it doesn't really go anywhere. And I love that, because that is what the author wants. It summarizes dissociation really well. It's meant to go nowhere because grief doesn't go anywhere. It just sits inside of us. And the protagonist is grieving the death of her parents. It's just not how we're used to seeing somebody grieve. It's pure privileged apathy. Riva is not meant to be understood. It's not trying to glamorize dissociation or being comfortably numb. That's not the point. Riva is unappealing on purpose. The author wants us to understand that hiding from everyone is miserable. It reminds me of Less Than Zero, a book by Bret Easton Ellis and made into a film. It's about super rich kids with nothing but fake friends. In Less Than Zero, Clay dissociates wherever he sees the sign "disappear here," and it's on a billboard early in the book. The phrase becomes this memorable slogan for the novel's characters, who are these spoiled rich kids who are depressed and bored. The phrase symbolizes the book's themes of nihilism and the consequences of moral depravity. Block Party wrote a song for Clay which lets you know the cultural impact of that book 30 years later. Sometimes escaping reality and having what you want or what you think you want all the time is an absolute disaster. If you've seen the film Memento by Christopher Nolan, it's a classic. In order to remain in reality, Leonard, the lead, tattoos himself because of his amnesia caused from this traumatic death of his wife. My own struggles with dissociation led me to get here tattooed on my hand where I can see it at all times. I've experienced dissociative amnesia and it can be super destabilizing to not comprehend your own reality. It's like blown out now, but at the time it felt like an anchor, a bit like switching a light on and off in a dream that lets you know you're dreaming. If I can see here, then I'm actually here. Edvard Munch, best known for The Scream, don't roll your eyes, let me land. Munch often channeled his emotional and psychological struggles into his art, which reflects themes of dissociation. Munch said, "My whole life has been spent walking by the side of a bottomless chasm, jumping from stone to stone. For as long as I can remember, I have suffered from a deep feeling of anxiety, which I have tried to express in my art. Without this anxiety and illness, I would have been like a ship without a rudder." Munch's own traumatic experiences, including the early deaths of his mother and sister and his battles with illness, deeply influenced his art. His diary entries and writings reveal his fascination with the psyche and the emotional turmoil that shaped his creative process. Being trapped in our minds, this visceral, overwhelming emotion is not safe to express and create. It gives us this sense of alienation and fragmentation. Hence why I call this episode Going Nowhere Fast, because the mind is often moving 1,000,000 miles per minute, but the body is suspended in time. Now I'm going to make this crystal clear. Do not attempt to make art about your trauma if you are unwell. Only do it if you feel safe and enough time has passed. Your art doesn't have to correlate to your trauma at all. I'm expressing this in a bid to help people feel less alone, less stigmatized and represented. I think art is a powerful healing tool, but that is my opinion. So let's tie this up in a bow. If you have been shamed or criticized or traumatized, you are in great company with the world's best artists. When we allow ourselves to make art with curiosity and indulge our senses, we release the shame over attempting to make our art.
About why my father hates me so much. No.
There's beauty in the breakdown, but instead of letting it break you, carve it into fragments. Study the pieces. What sharp edge of this pain could cut through into meaning? What haunting echo could become a melody? Transform the trigger into something that doesn't frighten you, but obeys you. Control it by truly seeing it. Honestly, I feel like traumatized people make much better art. There, I said it. The absence of their art is an injustice to what they've endured. For many, justice may never come, but art is kind of like a retribution, a soul's reckoning. It's alchemy. Every brushstroke, lyrical line becomes reclamation. When we turn our triggers into art, we take our power back and we recall our energy. This has been The State of the Artist.